Alright guys, welcome back, and in the last video we were essentially just fixing up our raycast hits and making sure that our enemies are getting hit and our masks are being ignored and so on and so forth. And in this video we want to start actually, essentially killing our zombies and also updating the score and thinking about our game over condition and our win conditions and so on and so forth. So I'll go ahead and switch over back onto the code. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this debug line since essentially that was just for testing purposes. Okay, so when we hit the enemy collider, this is where we essentially take care of the code that we will run when we want to kill an enemy. So this is where we will kill enemy. Okay, and how exactly are we going to do that? So there's a couple of things that we want to happen when we click on an enemy, right? We want some concept of a score. And we then want to kill that enemy, and therefore we want to activate another enemy, and so on and so forth. And to do all of this stuff, we will jump back into our game manager, okay? So what we will do is, when we click here, we can create a function in our game manager class, and we can call that function from our player input class, okay? So for example, if I come here, just like our pick new zombie function, if you come over here and if this time if I create a public void and let's call it kill enemy, and oops, okay, yeah, so if I create this function here, and let's go ahead and throw in a debug line in here, and we'll say kill enemy function called. Clearly I can't spell, but that's okay. Okay, alright, so the reason why I made this function public was because we're going to be accessing this function from another script, okay? So notice how this one here was private and we were only using it within the confines of this script, and that was okay. But because we're going to be calling this function from another essentially script on the same game object, we want to try and make it public so that it's a little bit more accessible, okay? So what we can do now is we can call that function from our player input script. Now if I jump back into Unity really quickly and if I go on our game manager, notice how the game manager script and the player input script, they are both on the same game object, right? So if I minimize this, if I go back into my game manager, notice how both of these scripts are basically two components on the same game manager object, okay? And in that case, getting reference to the other script and the variables and the functions therein is relatively easy, okay? So what I can do is I can simply do something like GameObject.getComponent, and I can search for the component game manager, which is the script, and inside it, I'm looking for a kill enemy function, okay? So the kill enemy function is like so, okay? So what exactly did we do? This lowercase game object means it is a reference to this particular game object onto which this player input script is attached, okay? So whenever I write lowercase game object, I'm actually asking Visual Studios and Unity to give me the reference to the game object which has this player input script. In this case, that game object is this one here, okay? Once I have the reference to that game object, what I do is I call upon .getComponent, okay? And I'm saying, hey, on this game object, look for a component of the type game manager. Now this type game manager is a script that we have created ourselves, okay? So I tell it, hey, on this game object, look for a component. So cycle through all of the components. In this case, it has three or four, but even if we had multiple, like let's say 10, 15, it would cycle through and it would check, hey, which one is the game manager? Which one is the game manager? And until it would hit this game manager, it would then return that essentially component. Inside that component, we've created a function called kill enemy, which is over here, and we just have a simple debug line in here, and it says kill enemy function call. Now, if all of this works out correctly, if I now save and if I jump back into Unity, and when I hit the play button, it's not going to look a lot different, but the kill enemy debug line, so notice how you see the kill enemy function called, that's actually control being passed from this script, that is the player input script, onto the game manager script, okay? So that is progress. And if you're wondering why we're actually doing that, well, we don't have to do that. But the reason why I chose to do that is because the game manager is essentially my central manager. It's taking care of my zombies, it's taking care of spawning my zombies, and so on and so forth. And I also, in this case, made a decision that I wanted to keep things such as the score of the game or the state of the game, whether the game is over or if it's not over within my game manager. So because I want to keep those things in here, I felt that this was a good decision to do. So far we have made some progress. Now every time we kill an enemy, we want to increase our score. Okay, so let's scroll up here and let's create a new variable. So we can call it private integer, and we'll call it, let's see, zombies smashed. Okay, and what we'll do is when the game starts, we can go ahead and initialize that variable to 0. Okay, so we can say zombies smashed is equals to 0. Okay, and every time we kill a zombie, we can increase this variable. Okay, so essentially I can come here and I can say zombies smashed plus plus. Okay, if you're confused about what plus plus means, it basically means it adds 1 to the value of the current variable. Okay, so it is sort of kind of like the same thing as me saying, and this is going to look a little bit weird, but it's saying, hey, take zombies smashed, right, whatever the value is, add 1 into it, okay, and then equate all of that into a new value for zombies smashed, okay? So these two lines of code here essentially mean the same thing. It takes the existing current value of zombies smashed, adds 1 to it, and then saves it back in zombies smashed, okay? So we're gonna go ahead and leave it like so. So now we have increased our score. What we also want to do is now we want to kill the enemy and then activate a new one. Well, we already know how to activate a new one because we have this function called pick new zombie. But before we pick a new zombie, let's go ahead and put that in here as well, because eventually we'll pick a new zombie and the whole thing will start again. But over here we want to write the code for killing enemy, okay? And how can we do that? The way we can do that is basically, if you remember, when the zombie is going up and it's going down, we had saved its start position. So what we can do is the enemy that we want to kill, we can simply just snap it back to its start position. So whenever we click on the enemy, click, and we'll move it back into the start position, so it will warp back, and then we will activate a new zombie, okay? And add on top of that, when later on, if you want to add some, particle effects or something like that, then it'll look juicy and fun. So let's go ahead and do that. We know how to get the active zombies, so we have an array of zombies, right? And we know that we have an active zombie index, so this is going to give us the current zombie. And what we can do is we can say, hey, transform.position equals to start position. Okay, so essentially all we did here was we found out the active zombie and we said, hey, move its position to its start position. So let's say if our current zombie was, let's see. So let's say the zombie here is going up and down, and whenever we click on it, we just say, hey, move its position to its start position. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and move it back. And then we do, hey, pick new zombie, okay? So I think this is looking relatively good. So if I so I think this is looking really good so far. And if I hit the save button right now, and if we switch on back, and if we hit play, then we can see what happens, okay? So if I hit the play button, when I click on this, it disappears, and another one comes, and of course I get the debug line, and when I click on another one, and when I click on this, and so things seem to be working just fine. We seem to be smashing our zombies, and also our score is being updated as well. So really quickly, every time we kill the enemy, let's go ahead and actually look at our score as well to make sure everything is correct. So every time all of this happens, every time we increase our counter, let's go ahead and debug the score as well. And we can do that by simply putting in the zombies smashed integer in here. Okay, so if I save it now, when I go back here and I run the game, we should see every time that we smash a zombie, we're going to see the score in our debug log. So our score is 1, and it's 2, and it's 3, and the score seems to be updating as well. Now, lastly, what I want to do is I want to very quickly talk about, hey, we want an end condition as well. So arbitrarily, what I thought was if we miss 3 zombies, the game is going to be over, okay? And once again, we can do all of that logic essentially in our game manager. So over here at the top, I'm going to declare another variable, and I'll call it, let's see, I'll call it lives remaining, okay? And I'm going to, in my start function, I'm going to say that lives remaining is equals to 3, okay? Because we just arbitrarily chose 3 as the number. All right, so now that we have declared our lives remaining variable and we've initialized it at 3, we can think about where we're actually going to decrease our life. And the place where we want to think about decreasing our life is in the situation where the zombie is going down, and he's going down, and we haven't yet smashed him yet, and it's all the way down to its starting position where it had initially started. And we can think about that being in the is falling, and we can see here that when the transform position of the zombie is less than its starting position or equal to its starting position. So in this case, the zombie has essentially either gone to its starting position all the way back, or it's gone below its starting position. So at this point, it means that the zombie has gone through its full cycle and it has survived and not been smashed. And this is a good place for us to think about decreasing our life. So what we can do is we can do lives remaining and minus minus, just like we did plus plus. It essentially takes the value of lives remaining and it decreases it by 1. Okay, so that means it's going to decrease our value every time lives remaining. It means that it's going to decrease our value every time we miss a zombie, okay? And what we can also do here is that when this happens, we can quickly check the value of lives remaining, okay? We can say, hey, if lives remaining is equal to 0, because the first time we miss a zombie, it's going to go from 3 to 2. Then the next time when we miss it, it's going to go from 2 to 1. And the third time we miss our zombie, it's going to go from 1 to 0, okay? So if lives remaining is 0, then we can do a quick debug log here, and we can say, hey, it's time for game over, okay? So it's time for game over, okay? If I now save this change, and if I switch back to Unity, let me just make sure we got everything. And if I switch back to Unity now, and if you play the game, and let's see what happens. Okay, so this is the first zombie, and we're going to miss him. Let's see if I can increase the speed a little bit to 2. And all right, so fair enough, over here we see it's time for game over. So when we missed the third, essentially the third zombie, we got that error message. So that means that's working. What now we need to do is we need to start thinking about how we can, have a game over condition. So what we can do is we can go over here all the way at the top, and we can create a new Boolean variable. We'll call it private bool game over. And what we're going to do is at the start of the game, we're going to say that game over is essentially, it's false because the game is not over. Okay, but when this happens, when lives remaining equals 0, we can say, hey, game over is equals to true. So now we've set the variable game over. What we want to do is this right here is the entirety of our game, okay? This update loop is basically where all of the action is happening. So we want to run all of this if and only if our game is still currently running, i.e. if the game is not over. Okay, so what I can do is I can come all the way here at the top of my update and I can put a big if condition and I can say, hey, check. If the game is not over, so by this exclamation mark, I'm switching it's a not sign, so basically I'm saying, hey, check if the game is not over, if the game over variable, essentially is not true, then what we want to do is we want to put all of this code here inside that if statement, okay? So we're going to go ahead and we're going to put it here like so, okay? So let me just quickly format this a little bit better. And okay, so let's see what's happening. When the game starts, right, game over is going to be false, right? And the first time when it comes in the update loop, what's going to happen is it's going to come here. It's going to say, hey, game over is false, but the not of false is true. So that means this if statement will pass, okay? And it will start running this code, okay? So for as long as the actual value of game over is false, okay, this update loop will run just as it did before. The only time when we have missed 3 zombies and now game over is switched to true, this statement here will become false and therefore none of this logic will run. So if this logic does not run, we know that it's time to end our game. So if I save here, if I jump back into Unity just to quickly check, and let's increase the speed to 2 just so we can see this happen a little bit quickly. And if I hit play now, let's see. That's 1, that's 2, that's our 3rd guy, and boom, it's time for game over, and there's no more of anything happening basically. So nothing in our game is happening. At this point, we can show a game over screen and so on and so forth. Okay guys, so I think we've made a lot of progress in this video. I think this is a good time to have a quick break, and I'll see you on the other side.